My husband chose money over our daughter's safety. The school chose its reputation over its responsibility. My entire world seemed to have been bought by power and deceit. They thought they were dealing with a cornered, lonely mother. But they made a fatal mistake. Besides being a commanding officer, I am also a mother, and a mother will never stand by while her child is bullied. What do you do when justice fails and you have to create it yourself? I am Major Maya Rodriguez, of the U.S. Army Signal Corps. People call me the Iron Orchid, for being cold, determined, and precise everything needed to run a counterintelligence operation. I spend most of my days hunting ghosts in cyberspace, the kind who believe they can attack our national security infrastructure without a trace. My work requires precision, patience, and a cool head. This afternoon, General Miller awarded me the Meritorious Service Medal, a successful counter-op, a major attack thwarted, an effective day at the office. But during the 40-minute drive on Interstate 95 back to my home in Alexandria, Virginia, the uniform and the persona of Major Rodriguez were gradually shed. I try to become Maya Vance, a wife, a mother. Our house is beautiful but cold and silent, the kind of silence money can buy but never fill. My husband John was in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, pacing back and forth on the Italian marble floor. No, Arthur, I want that number in writing by Friday. No exceptions. He gave me a cursory nod, waving a hand to signal me not to bother him. Business as usual. His multi-million-dollar deals were always more important than my return. I set down my briefcase and saw my daughter, Lily, sitting quietly on the sofa, hugging her arms, eyes fixed on the floor, a small figure in a vast house. She didn't run to hug me like she used to. "Hey, sweetie," I said, my voice deliberately gentle. "Hi, Mom," she whispered, her eyes never meeting mine. That's when I saw it. A dark thumb-shaped bruise blooming on her forearm, just below the sleeve of her pajamas. The air in my lungs turned to ice. I knelt, gently taking her hand. "Lily, where did this come from?" She flinched, pulling her hand back, her eyes darting nervously toward the living room. I fell. At the playground. Her voice was flat, robotic, as if she'd rehearsed the line 100 times. "Oh?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Did it hurt?" Lily just nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. John had just ended his call. He yanked his silk tie loose, a habit he had when his patients wore thin, and walked over with a look of annoyance. "For God's sake, Maya, can you turn off that mode for 5 minutes? It's called a playground. Kids fall. The Army has made you way too controlling." "This doesn't look like a bruise from a fall, John." He rolled his eyes, a dismissive gesture I knew all too well. "Here we go again. Not everything is a mission that needs a debrief. That's your problem. You bring that insane Fort Meade control freak mentality home. She's fine. Right, Lily?" Lily nodded furiously, her gaze still glued to the floor. "I'm fine, Mom." An icy rage ran down my spine. Arguing with John right now would be pointless. He would just repeat his lines about my job making me paranoid, about how I needed to relax. I knew that script by heart, so I stayed silent. And I watched. I watched my daughter, the quick glance she shot her father before answering me. It was just a flicker, but it said everything. She wasn't just lying. She was following a script she'd been given. And John was the director. "All right," I said, standing up. "I'm going to take a shower. We'll read a story later, okay?" I stroked her hair, but my eyes were on John. He didn't see the look in my eyes. He never did. He saw a wife he could dismiss. He didn't see Major Rodriguez planning her next operation. And this one was personal. That night, I sat on the edge of Lily's bed, reading her an old storybook about constellations. I didn't ask any more questions about the bruise. Instead, I created a safe space, a buffer zone. She slowly relaxed, resting her head on my shoulder. After she was sound asleep, I quietly left the room. On my way downstairs, I saw her laptop still open on the small desk in the hallway. The screen was still lit. A forgetful child. I approached it. A message was open, the recipient listed as Grandma. It was in the drafts folder. She had written it but hadn't dared to send it. The words appeared, simple and brutal in a way only a child's can be. "Grandma, school isn't fun. Tiffany and her friends pushed me again. They locked me in the locker room and said nobody likes me. I'm scared." I told Dad. But Dad said not to tell Mom because Mr. Caldwell, Tiffany's dad, is very important, and Mom will mess everything up. Mr. Caldwell, Arthur Caldwell, John's partner in the multi-million-dollar deal. I took a screenshot of the message with my phone, silent as a ghost. Then, I closed the laptop and placed it back exactly where it was. I went downstairs. John was on the expensive white leather sofa, watching financial news on the large screen TV. I said nothing, just stood in front of him and held up my phone. The light from the screen illuminated his indifferent face. "What are you doing, Maya?" "I'm watching this. I want you to see this," I said, my voice calm. He glanced at the phone screen, annoyance plain on his face. He skimmed it, then frowned. When he reached the last line, his expression changed. "You went through her things?" That was the first thing he said. Not, "Oh my God, our daughter," but an accusation. "Lily wrote it, but she was too afraid to send it. Afraid of you, afraid of me, and afraid of what's happening at school," I said. "I want to know why my husband is teaching our daughter to hide the truth from her own mother." John shot to his feet. The smugness was gone, replaced by a panicked fury. "That's just kids' stuff. You're blowing this out of proportion, as usual. Do you have any idea that Arthur Caldwell can make or break the entire River Creek project?" "That's a fortune, Maya." "I don't care about the River Creek project," I shot back, my voice like ice. "I care that our daughter is being bullied, and you knew about it." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. He stared at me, and for a second, his polished veneer cracked. "I knew," he hissed. "I knew, and I handled it." "Handled it?" I repeated, trying to process the real meaning of his words. "How did you handle it? By telling our daughter to be quiet? By telling her to toughen up? It's not a playground out there, Maya. If she doesn't learn to fend for herself, she'll get crushed." The last straw. The first crack had appeared. The truth wasn't that John didn't know. The truth was that he knew, and he chose money over our daughter's safety. He had made her an unwilling accomplice in his own cowardice. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just looked at him, the man I once loved, and saw a stranger. I turned and walked away. "We're not done talking," he yelled after me. "Oh, we're done," I said without looking back. "But I'm just getting started." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my home office, a map of Alexandria spread out on my desk. The mission objective had changed. It was no longer just about protecting Lily. Now, it was about dismantling their entire empire. The next morning, I dressed in civilian clothes. A simple white blouse, black trousers, flat shoes. Nothing to suggest the military. Today, I was just a mother. Oak Ridge Prep Academy looked more like a country club than a school. Manicured lawns, old brick buildings, a place where money was used to buy a false sense of security. Principal Davis's office was luxurious. He was a man with slicked-back gray hair and a professional smile polished by thousands of parent-teacher conferences. "Mrs. Vance," he said, shaking my hand dismissively. "A pleasure to see you." I didn't return the pleasantry. I got straight to the point, placing my phone on his polished teak desk. The screen still showed Lily's email. "My daughter is being bullied. This is the proof," I said. Principal Davis put on his glasses and glanced at the screen. His smile wavered. "Ah, yes, this. We are very sorry to hear about this. Children can be a bit boisterous at times. You know how it is. I know that Tiffany Caldwell is the daughter of Arthur Caldwell, one of your school's biggest donors," I continued, my voice even. "And I know that boisterous is a mild word for locking an 8-year-old girl in a locker room." My composure seemed to unnerve him. He was prepared for a hysterical mother, not an interrogation. His smile faltered. "Mrs. Vance, we take this very seriously. We will look into it immediately." He emphasized, "look into" with artificial weight. However, sometimes sensitive children like Lily can require a bit of psychological support to better integrate. A blatant cover-up. He was blaming the victim. His school's endowment received fat checks from the Caldwells, and he wasn't going to let this little incident jeopardize that. I had my answer. I stood up. The meeting was over. I had what I needed, confirmation of a system rotten from the top down. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove downtown, to the glass and steel office tower where Caldwell Enterprises was headquartered. I didn't have an appointment. I walked straight to the front desk. I need to see Mr. Caldwell. I'm Lily Vance's mother. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in his office, a vast space overlooking the Potomac River. Arthur Caldwell was a large man in an expensive suit with a deliberately crushing handshake meant to establish dominance. Mrs. Vance, he began, settling into his leather chair. I hear there's been a small misunderstanding at our daughter's school. There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Caldwell, I replied. Your daughter has been bullying my daughter, and I want it to stop. He chuckled, a condescending sound. Major, he said, emphasizing my rank, showing he'd done his homework. The world is a tough place. Kids need to toughen up. Perhaps you should spend less time on base and teach your girl to be a little stronger instead of running to tell on others. And perhaps you should teach your daughter how to be a human being instead of acting like a spoiled thug, I said, my tone unchanging. The smile vanished from Caldwell's face. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a threat. You should be careful, Major. Alexandria is a small town. Connections are important. You wouldn't want to cause any unnecessary trouble for your career. Or your husband's. That was it. The wall of silence was up. The school, the power, the money, all of it was against me. Even my husband had chosen their side. They had made a grave mistake. They thought they were cornering a lonely mother. They didn't know they had just declared war on a commanding officer. And I have never lost a war I chose to fight. Driving back from Caldwell's office, I kept my hands steady on the wheel. But as I turned onto a quiet side street, I had to pull over. My hands started to shake. An uncontrollable reaction after the intense confrontation. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white, taking a deep, steadying breath to regain control. The tremor passed in a few seconds. Okay, emotion is a luxury. Time to get to work. I felt a cold clarity. They had built a fortress. The school was the outer wall. Caldwell's money was the heavy artillery. And John was the traitor on the inside. A conventional, head-on assault would be suicide. That night, after making sure Lily was fast asleep, I went into my home office. It was my space, neat and orderly. On a bookshelf sat a faded old photograph, taken in Kandahar. A group of young, tired but determined faces in combat fatigues. My eyes settled on one person, Jack Riley. Jack was a former Army Ranger. He was the guy who found paths that weren't on any map, who could open a locked door with a paperclip and infinite patience. The last time we worked together, we were pinned down in a hostile village, comms down. Jack found an old tunnel and got the whole team out. He was the person you called when all official channels were closed. After leaving the service, he opened a private investigation firm in Washington, D.C. I still had his number. I didn't hesitate. I dialed. Riley. His voice was as gravelly and direct as I remembered. Jack, it's Maya Rodriguez. A short pause, then a low chuckle. Major. Long time. Still making trouble for the bad guys? This time, the bad guys are in my backyard, I said, and I need your help. Send me the address. I met him in D.C. the next morning. His office wasn't in a glass tower. It was on the second floor of an old brick building in Georgetown, above a used bookstore. No flashy sign, just a small plaque on the wooden door, Riley Strategic Solutions. Inside, the workspace was Spartan but packed with high-tech gear. I didn't vent. I gave a situation report, presented the email screenshot, recounted the conversations with Davis and Caldwell, analyzed the links between John and his partner. I laid it out like an intelligence briefing. Jack listened without interrupting, his sharp eyes analyzing every detail. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me like a comrade assessing a new battlefield. When I finished, he nodded. Psychological warfare, a high-value asset threatened, and an organized enemy network. Roger that. He used our terms. He understood. They think they've blocked all the exits, I said. They've blocked the exits on the map, he corrected. We're going off map." He stood up and walked to a large whiteboard on the wall. "The lonely mother is your cover. Major Rodriguez is the reality. We'll use their own arrogance against them. They think you're alone, so they'll never see the army you have behind you." He turned and looked me straight in the eye. "Maya, this one's on the house. Justice has to take the long way around sometimes, and we're experts at taking the long way." It was a promise. A pact sealed not in ink, but in trust forged under fire. I left Jack's office, the feeling of isolation gone. The wall of silence they had built was still standing. But now, I had the tools to bring it down, brick by brick. The work began immediately. Jack's team operated like a small, elite task force. They had a former NSA cyber analyst, a forensic accountant who used to work for the Treasury Department, and a street-level PI who knew every corner of Virginia. They were ghosts, efficient and invisible. Target 1, Oak Ridge Prep Academy. "The school's security system is a joke," Jack reported over an encrypted line just 2 days later. "They have cameras in the hallways, but nothing in the back playground or near the locker rooms. However, every student has a phone." By the end of the week, we had what we needed: a short, grainy video filmed by another student. It clearly showed Tiffany and 2 of her friends cornering Lily in a secluded part of the playground, snatching her backpack and throwing it on the ground. It wasn't perfect evidence, but it was a start. More importantly, it corroborated Lily's story and exposed the school's cover-up. Target 2, Arthur Caldwell and Jonathan Vance. This was the main event. "Caldwell is clean on paper," Jack said at our next meeting. "But your husband John is a mess. He's living way beyond his means." Jack's forensic accountant dug into John's transactions. Business trips to Miami that were actually lavish weekend getaways. Huge project expenses being funneled into a shell company registered to one of John's distant relatives. And then they found her. "The young architect," Jack said, sliding a file across the table. "Name's Jessica Lang. Caldwell placed her in John's firm 6 months ago. John's been paying the rent on her luxury apartment in Arlington. Coincidentally, the apartment is owned by a subsidiary of Caldwell Enterprises. It was a closed loop, an ecosystem of deceit, money, sex, power, all used to manipulate and control. I looked at the photos of John and Jessica having dinner at an expensive restaurant laughing. I felt no pain. Just the cold confirmation of a truth I had long suspected. Our marriage was just a contract he had breached. And then, they delivered the kill shot. Jack's ex-NSA analyst found the vulnerability. Not in Caldwell's system, but in John's arrogance. John was using a private, unsecured email server to communicate his most sensitive information to Caldwell. He thought he was being clever. Jack called me in the middle of the night. "We're in, Maya." On the shared screen, I read the email exchanges between my husband and Arthur Caldwell. They weren't just talking about rigging construction bids or hiding income. They were talking about a much bigger plan. The River Creek project wasn't just a housing development. It was a massive money laundering operation disguised as real estate. John wasn't a partner. He was a pawn, the fall guy if things went south. "Don't worry about your wife," one of Caldwell's emails read. "She's just a soldier. She only knows how to follow orders. Just keep her busy with the girl and you'll be fine." I read that sentence over and over. "She's just a soldier." Wrong, Caldwell. I'm not just a soldier. I'm a commanding officer. And I just found the enemy's critical weakness. I shut down the screen. The evidence was complete. Video, financial records, photos of the affair, and now a criminal conspiracy. The fortress they built wasn't as strong as they thought. It was built on arrogance and lies. And I knew exactly where to plant the charges to bring it all crashing down. I had everything I needed. Video, financial documents, emails. But just throwing it all out there at once would only create chaos. I needed a plan where they would expose themselves. It started with making John drop his guard. That evening, when he came home, I was waiting. I wasn't angry, not accusatory. I appeared tired and somewhat defeated. "John, I'm sorry," I began, my voice modulated to sound weak. "I've thought about it. You were right. I overreacted. I won't go to the school or bother Mr. Caldwell again." John froze. He was prepared for an argument, not a surrender. His surprise quickly turned into smug satisfaction. He believed he had won, that Caldwell's threats had worked. "I'm glad you see it my way, Maya," he said, his tone patronizing. "Everything I do is for the future of this family." "I know," I said, looking down. "I'll focus on taking care of Lily. I promise there won't be any more trouble." He completely bought my performance. Next, I needed to gather allies. I couldn't fight this alone. I needed others who had also been victims of the Caldwell's arrogance. Jack provided me with a list. 4 other families who had pulled their kids out of Oak Ridge Prep over the past 2 years for personal reasons. I sought them out. Not as Major Rodriguez, but as a mother. I showed them the video of Lily. I told them my story. At first, they were hesitant. The fear was deeply ingrained. But when one voice speaks up, others find their courage. One woman's son had a broken arm from a fall down the stairs that involved Tiffany. Another's daughter suffered from severe depression after months of being ostracized. We had a small army, united by a common goal. The final phase was choosing the battlefield. I didn't want a quiet courtroom or a closed-door settlement. I wanted a public collapse, an event everyone would have to witness with no room for denial. And John handed me the perfect battlefield himself. "I want you to come with me," he said a week later, holding out a lavishly printed invitation. "The Vance Development Annual Gala. A lot of politicians and investors will be there. I want you by my side, as a family." He wanted me as an accessory, a testament to his fake success. I looked at the invitation, feeling the weight of its irony. "Of course, darling," I said with a smile. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The plan was set. Time, place, targets. Everything was in position. I had contacted a trusted investigative reporter from the Washington Post, someone Jack recommended. He would be at the gala as a guest. Jack's team would handle the technical side. The other parents would be there as witnesses, ready to speak out when the time came. They thought I had been subdued. They were preparing for a night of celebration. They had no idea they were walking straight into a perfectly planned ambush. And the commanding officer of that ambush was the woman smiling by their side. The gala was held at the Mayflower Hotel, an old, opulent place in the heart of D.C. The ballroom air was thick with expensive perfume and fake conversations. I wore a simple but sharp black dress, standing next to John. He held my hand, giving it an occasional squeeze to remind me to smile. He was playing the part of the successful husband with a perfect family. I was playing my part too. Arthur Caldwell was there as the guest of honor. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands with politicians, clapping investors on the back, a king surveying his kingdom. As he passed me, he gave a slight, condescending nod, the nod of a victor. I checked my watch. 10 p.m. It was time. John took the stage to a round of warm applause. The spotlight hit him, highlighting his perfectly tailored suit. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming through the ballroom, "I stand here tonight not just as the president of Vance Development, but as a husband and a father. Success in business means nothing if we don't build it on a foundation of integrity and family values." That was the cue. I glanced toward the audiovisual booth at the back of the room. A technician gave a subtle nod. He was one of Jack's people. Behind John, the massive LED screen that had been displaying the Vance Development logo flickered and went black. Then it lit up again. But it wasn't his logo anymore. It was my daughter's terrified face. The video of Tiffany and her friends bullying Lily played, silent, just the raw, cruel images. I saw a woman in an evening gown at a front table cover her mouth in horror. Next to her, a well-known senator who had been sitting with Caldwell abruptly pushed back his chair and walked swiftly out of the room, his face a mask of disgust. A murmur rippled through the crowd. John stopped mid-sentence and turned around. His face went pale. "We seem to be having a minor technical issue," he stammered. But the screen changed again. This time it was photos. John and Jessica Lang, the young architect, walking hand in hand out of a hotel in Miami, John kissing her in a fancy restaurant. The murmurs turned into shocked gasps, and several people pulled out their phones and started recording the stage. This is fake," John shouted, but his microphone suddenly sputtered with static and died. And then, the screen showed the emails. The exchanges between John and Caldwell, the numbers, the money laundering plans, and Caldwell's fatal line, "She's just a soldier. Just keep her busy with the girl, and you'll be fine." The ballroom fell silent. A heavy, damning silence. At that moment, my lawyer, who had entered from a side door, walked onto the stage from the other side. She held a wireless microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice clear and firm, "my name is Helen Rios. What you have just seen is not a technical issue. It is evidence. Evidence of crimes, of fraud, and of moral corruption." John and Caldwell stood frozen on the stage, trapped in the spotlights like two criminals. And then, the main doors to the ballroom swung open. It wasn't hotel staff. It was FBI agents, their jackets emblazoned with large yellow letters, and investigators from the IRS. They moved in with quiet, professional order, heading straight for the stage. There was no screaming, no chaos, just the cold, inevitable collapse of an empire built on lies. I didn't watch them anymore. I turned and calmly walked out of the ballroom, past the stunned faces of the guests. My mission was complete. Outside, Jack was waiting with a car. He opened the door for me. "It's done, Major," he said. "It's done," I repeated, taking a deep breath of the cold night air. Now it's time to go home to my daughter. The storm hit faster and harder than I could have imagined. The next day, the story of the Gala of Collapse was on every news outlet. The Washington Post, prepared in advance by the investigative reporter, published a long-form exposé detailing Caldwell's entire money laundering scheme and John's role in it. Vance Development collapsed in a week. Investors pulled out, projects were frozen, employees resigned en masse. John and Arthur Caldwell faced a litany of federal charges. Their trials would be long, but the outcome was certain. They would pay. Oak Ridge Prep Academy was not spared. Under pressure from parents and the media, Principal Davis was forced to resign. Tiffany Caldwell was expelled. A full-scale investigation into the school's culture of bullying was launched. Justice, however late, had finally arrived. I filed for divorce. John didn't contest it. He had nothing left to lose and no face left to show me. The proceedings were swift. I was granted full custody of Lily. The luxurious house in Alexandria, a symbol of a fake life, was sold to cover John's debts and legal fees. Lily and I moved, not to another opulent place, but to a small, quiet house in the suburbs with a garden out back. For the first time in years, it felt like home. Lily began to change. She transferred to a normal public school where no one cared who her parents were. She started making friends, laughing more, and the bruises never reappeared. Therapy helped her process the fear. She started drawing again, pictures full of bright, happy colors. Jack still visited from time to time. He was no longer a comrade in an operation, but a friend, a beloved uncle figure to Lily. He would bring her model airplanes and teach her how to assemble them. Watching them laugh together, I felt a simple sense of peace. One Saturday afternoon, the sky was clear and blue. I was in the garden planting a bed of lavender when Lily ran out, holding a freshly drawn picture. "Mommy, look," she said cheerfully. The picture was of our small house. In front of it stood two figures, one large and one small, holding hands. Surrounding them were vibrant flowers and a bright blue sky. I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the sun-warmed scent of her hair. "It's beautiful, sweetie. Absolutely beautiful." I was no longer the iron orchid on the battlefield, nor was I Maya Vance in an empty marriage. I was simply Maya, Lily's mom. The storm had passed. Behind us lay the ashes of a deceitful empire. Ahead, in the warm sunlight, was a new life waiting, a life built not on money or power, but on truth, love, and courage. And this time, I knew for sure we were going to be okay.